morning. Welcome to Viewpoint, your program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. We're going to take a good look, if you excuse a bad pun, at this perspective this morning. We'll bring our guest on very, very shortly. In the meantime, Doctor, we always try to start Viewpoint with a kudo or two. So we'll just keep this kudo local, and at the same time give a little plug to the Zonda Group, a ladies' organization that does a lot of good here, the Civic Club here in the community. Do a lot of fine things for everybody, and they're having their annual turkey dinner. So in a matter of making sure we announce that and plug it a little bit, we'll just use this on as our kudos. That'd be okay with you, Mrs. Busby?
I think that would be good because they can make a heck of a good dinner.
Well, they sure do.
Do you want me to use a microphone?
Yeah, pull that microphone. She's new here. She's not. She's just not quite the way we do things up here. We'll break her in.
I haven't completed my tutorial yet.
So, Sunday, November the 5th, which is coming up right around the corner. October 28th is coming right around the corner, so November 5th follows October the 28th. I guess that's the way it goes, isn't it? At 10 a.m. to 1:30, next Sunday, November the 5th, at, of course, again, at the Lincoln Community High School. Very simple to go down the line there, and you're going to get turkey and all the trimmings and a huge variety of homemade desserts, and you can dine in or carry it out. And it's only $12 for adults and $6 for children under 12. Now, if you want to save a buck, go to get those tickets early, but they have a limited amount of tickets at the front door for $13. And to reserve your tickets.
And you can consider it a dry run for Thanksgiving.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
Practice.
Right, practice, all right. 671-9311. 671-9311. Reserve a ticket for the Zona dinner. So that's my kudo today, and I'll give that to Mr. Ash, and he already has that information, and he's going to continue to give them a plug. Now, why are we here?
Well, because we invited somebody to meet us, and it would be so rude not to show up. Dr. Todd Nobbe is with us today, and I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say, Doctor, because one of the things that my friend, the guru on the computer, found was just exactly the kind of thing I was hoping you'd address. One of the things that they write articles on right along is myopia. Why so many kids are nearsighted these days. And I was wondering if there could be any connection between the fact that young and old spend so much time in front of computers and iPads and cell phones, etc., etc., etc.
That's right.
Now, are you noticing a difference in your practice now that they've become so widespread, or don't you think it affects people's eyes?
Well, working on a computer and so forth, or the iPads or the iPhones, which is mostly what a lot of people are on these days, really has an impact on keeping your eyes focused throughout the day. So instead of going out and maybe walking around and looking at something in the distance, which relaxes your eyes, when you're looking at something up close, they're focused, and that focus can eventually lead to a little bit more nearsighted and so forth. In this country, that's a lot of what we are. We have a lot of nearsighted folks. You go to some other countries, I've been to a mission field in the Dominican, for instance, and most people over there are farsighted.
Really?
Yeah. So when they get to a point where they need some help, it's mostly with reading. So just even some reading glasses helps there, or maybe some other type of conditions like astigmatism that might keep them from working. And so simple glasses at that point would literally put them back in the working field.
Is there a correlation to kind of a geographic separation, so to speak? Is there a correlation to that of any kind, Todd? You mentioned the Dominican Republic, and
when you talk about things like that, it really, of course, the people group that you're talking about, wherever it is, some groups are more at risk for certain eye disease, and other groups have their own eye diseases and so forth. But over there, as far as you talked about glasses and prescriptions and myopia and things along those lines, that's really where it comes in there. They're not doing as much as reading. They don't have that.
Sure.
How
about just book reading? I suppose that's the same thing if you're an avid reader.
Well, reading in general, most of the time, I guess I don't always think about it as someone like really progressing in the nearsightedness realm. Most of the time, you look at the genetics of the family, playing a little bit of a role and so forth coming into that. But the bigger thing, I think, is if you've got a young kid that's really progressing through, and we get those once in a while where they may be jumping literally in 6 months, changing their prescription to needing something stronger to see. And so those individuals, we might use a rigid contact lens, for instance, to act as a retainer on the eye to kind of keep that nearsightedness from going forward. And some other thought processes along those lines are, using some glasses that have a little bit of reading prescription in them, so that when they look down, their eyes aren't so focused, on the up close. So there's some things like that have been thought and being done as well.
I'd like to offer Judy. I'd like to offer our number 648-5510. There are a lot of folks. Most of us out there that are wearing glasses, and somebody might have a technical question. Don't be afraid to ask it. We won't charge you more than the usual fee. And 648-5510. Seriously, we'd appreciate, Doctor would appreciate some inquiries about that. Todd, what is the correlation between measles and eye problems? And the reason I asked that question is when I was a kid, I went through the usual childhood diseases. Among them was measles. Mm-hmm. And I remember that my mother kept my bedroom closed tightly, dark. And sure enough, I had bad eyes anyway. But tell us about the background in that. Is there a correlation?
I don't know if I have a correlation with that specifically. Uh-huh. And
well, see, you're just a kid. You didn't remember measles.
I don't have to. I mean, that's true. I don't really deal with any of those things throughout what I do
really?
right now.
That's
so no. And we just don't go into that. And but on a quick side note, I want to make sure you told me you mentioned the Zana Club this morning. I was a recipient of that, and I just want to make sure I noted that. I really appreciate what they do for those dinners and so forth. So,
well, bless your heart. Yeah. Thank you.
Way back then.
For Zana, good for them. All right. Now, you mentioned contacts. Very common today.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Become more so, I guess, just on a regular daily basis.
Sure.
And you mentioned, used a term that I wasn't aware of, hard contacts, as opposed to what we always thought of was. I decided I'd never try those. I was too old for that by the time that came around. But how has that evolved?
Contact lenses have made a big change over the years. Initially they were made of a harder material, harder plastic, didn't let very much oxygen through. Those were originally called the hard lenses that people are used to hearing about. And then they became gas permeable over time, meaning they let more oxygen through the lens, but still hard and rigid. Now, those are the kind of contacts I was just mentioning ago can help slow down some progression of nearsightedness, as well as some other techniques that are being done today. But most contacts that we do, I mean, literally 98% of what we do is soft contact lenses today. And soft contact lenses are soft; they're easy to get adjusted to versus the older rigid contact lenses.
Are soft contacts always the disposable kind or not?
Today they really are. I mean, most of what we do is one-day disposable contacts.
Tell me that again. Say that again.
It's a one-day disposable contact lens, and what that does is we know that approximately 85% of contact lens related eye infections come from a case. So if you're not taking the contact out and putting it in a case, that's where you get these chances for more infection and reinserting back in the eye. So if you have a contact that's a one-time use, that you peel it open, put it in, wear it for the day, throw it away, and then start the next day. So it's great. So anybody who's worn contacts, they really appreciate that because they get that fresh, clean contact lens feeling every day when they put them on.
Wouldn't that be expensive?
Really, they've made it pretty nice in that regard. Once you buy solutions, for instance, for a traditional, maybe a monthly wearing contact where you have to clean it. Once you buy those contacts, which would be a cheaper upfront cost, you're still going out and spending $125 at wherever you buy your solutions at for that same. So if you look at the whole year, they're much more comparable. They're much more close in price.
Now, Judith, they say you're supposed to learn something new every day.
And so you did.
I've accomplished that this morning. One day.
And it's not even 8:30.
I was glad to help on that.
One day contacts. Well, this old fellow's lived long enough to see a lot of things strange. I never heard of throwaway glasses. That's really interesting.
You never know. There may be.
Yeah, that's very. And I presume that the younger, when you get to be a little along in the tooth and you don't have to worry with those things, these are the contacts of that type that you now discuss, younger people.
Yeah, definitely younger people want to do that type of thing. And, we start usually age 8 to 10 if the kid's able to do that type of thing. And, once they're in them, they typically want to keep wearing them, and then, so eventually what happens to a lot of people, and there's probably some listeners out there this has happened to, where the contacts were irritated or dried or, whatever the case may be. And there's so many different influences, from medications, from air conditioning in a room to, just the person getting older and drier in the eyes that really makes that contact lens uncomfortable when they wear it. And so, the one-day disposable, again, for folks that have drier eyes or have allergies is a really nice contact. And the other nice thing about it is, once you open it, you can, I can go work out or whatever I want to do for a couple hours and then get rid of it if I don't want to wear my glasses during that type of event.
Really?
Versus if you have your, like a 1 month lens, which is the other one we do quite a bit of, that type of lens, you literally have to keep it clean while it's in its case, even if you're not wearing it. So, that's where, you got to make sure the cleanliness stays there.
Yeah, I'd be real concerned about hygiene, because you're not going to get a new set of eyes ever.
That's right. That's right.
This is your issue. That's all you get.
Yeah.
You'd have to be careful about your hands being clean. You mentioned the case that you'd keep your contacts in.
Right. Yeah, all those things have an impact. And, from the standpoint of, folks that have dropped out either from, drier eyes or things along those lines, we're doing more with dry eye treatments today to allow much more comfortable eyes, first of all, because you'll know people probably that without any contact lens wear, their eyes are dry or irritated, or maybe they have excess watering or gritty feelings in their eyes. Those are all dry eye symptoms. So, once we start working on someone's dry eye, which there's a gamut of things we can do with that, then they even sometimes will go back and wear contact lenses a little bit if they had dropped out at one time and can do that.
Why do people get dry eye?
A number of reasons. Could be some medications they're taking. As time goes on, there's little glands within your eyelid called meibomian glands that produce oils. So, like for instance, what you eat, such as fish or the omega-3 from fish or some other types of oils you get in your body, they get in these oil glands. I call them zerks sometimes for where they come out on the eye. And once they're there, then every time you blink, you got them on the top and the bottom. Every time you blink, it draws out the oil from those glands across the eye and just drapes a little bit of oil across the surface. So for people as they get older, those glands start to shrink a little bit, or they don't have the oil in their diet, or inflammation just in itself is a major cause for these glands to start to deteriorate. So we supplement in high levels of omega-3s. We use a company called I Promise, which has a bunch of different, not only just oils, but anti-inflammatories in the product. And so when we do that, that patient starts to take it, maybe in sometimes as early as 2 weeks, but usually a 1 to 3 month time period, they start to notice some relief with their eyes again and so forth. So it's very, if you've ever had it, it's uncomfortable. And so, and I'm sure your audience, anybody out there that has, is nodding their heads right now because it's very uncomfortable.
Both of them.
What's that?
Both of them out there in the audience.
Yeah, that's right. I heard you did too.
Yeah,
that's great.
all two of them.
Judy, I'd like to establish our guest credentials here this morning. Young man, local boy. Tell us about your professional education beyond your college years. Where did you?
I appreciate that. That's a good question.
Because it's important to establish your credentials.
Yeah. So, of course, a graduate of Lincoln Community High School, and I went to Carbondale, SAU in Carbondale for 4 years. Got a degree in biological science and minored in chemistry.
Oh, those smart young kids.
And then when I went to optometry school, 4 years in optometry school in Chicago at the Illinois College of Optometry, and I got a visual, gosh, what do they call it? Visual science degree there, as well as my doctorate. So that's my credentials.
Well, that local boy made good,
Yes, yes.
So it's nice to, and he came back home to open up his practice.
Glad to be back home.
Exceedingly
Make his living
nice.
here. You
That's
betcha.
right.
Go ahead, Judy.
How about, and you talked about getting older. Bill and I are practicing to do that. And is that why you get these floaters in your eyes?
Floaters, that's a really another good question. I love these questions. Inside your eyeball, there is a gel in the back 2/3 of the eye, if you can imagine that. So in the back 2/3 of the eye, you have this gel called the vitreous. And the vitreous is really packed in there tight up against your retina. It's clear in general. Light passes through it very easily, and once you hit 40, maybe 50 in that time zone, that gel will start to peel away a little bit, or then even shrink away. And sometimes trauma can cause that. If you're getting hit in some way or another, you fall off a horse, whatever it is, and it jolts that and it pulls that loose. And so some of those things that are in there is that coming loose, and it'll leave like that tissue starts to overlap on itself. And once it overlaps on itself and light hits it, it's like it casts the shadow, and then you start seeing it as a floater. So a quick example of this, if I had some saran wrap and it's pulled tight and you shine a light through it, you're not seeing anything on the wall, right, that you're shining the light on. But if I crumple that a little bit and then you shine the light through it, now you're seeing like a little shadow on the wall. And that's the same thing in the eye, but the shadow's showing up on your retina, and that's why you see this little black floating around. Some people describe them as hairs or amoeba looking type things in their vision and so forth. Yeah, so that's a floater, but just to make sure I complete that thought, anytime someone has any flashes of light or sparkles with that, very, very important to make sure they get that checked out in the dilated eye exam, because at the same time these things can happen, it can peel a piece of your retina away, and we want to make sure that that's not taking place, because if it's starting a retinal detachment, which has the same symptoms, you really want to make sure that gets looked at, because if you have that, it may need to go for some further treatment.
What if you are a victim of detached retina? Is that pretty hard to repair, or is it irreparable?
No, there's repairs certainly for that. It depends. In some cases, you're familiar with hearing about the macula. That is the center part of the eye where everything's focused for your light. It's your best part of your vision. And so that area back there called the macula, if it gets peeled away with it, the visual outcome's not going to be very good after a retinal detachment. So the thing we watch for very carefully is we make sure the macula is still on. And if that's on and you got a little bit peeling off of the retina in one area, that's something we want to get urgent treatment to the surgeon to make sure they'll go in and start working on that. If it actually takes off the macula, the urgency of that getting in for immediate surgery goes down significantly. We still want to fix it, but once that's pulled away, we already know that that's going to affect the vision adversely. Which
brings us to the very, very common term now, macular degeneration. Such a very, very common thing. Jean has put up with that for a number of years, and whereas her peripheral vision is pretty decent. It's getting worse now. Dr. Lowenthal, whom
Rob Lowenthal,
puts shots in her eyes periodically. That sounds a little vicious, but it's not really.
What'd she do to him? I don't know.
But and the purpose of that, as I understand it, Doctor, is that it's to slow the advancement of it. You're not going to clear or cure macular degeneration. Am I correct in saying it's the rate at which it advances itself?
Well,
generally.
Yeah, Bill, this is a great question, and I actually have to start this conversation by telling you just a couple things to answer that question thoroughly, so everybody's on board with that. There's two types of macular degeneration. There's a drier type in the back of the eye where it affects the retina, again the macula area where your best vision is, and then there's a wet type. And wet type simply means that there's bleeding going on in the back of the eye. So for the folks that are having the dry type, which is the most common, and then the folks that are having the wet type or the bleeding type are the ones that are going to have the injections that you're talking about. So most people will have this dry type of macular degeneration, and then it can go on to advance into some bleeding. And so in those particular cases, they're injecting some chemicals into the eye to help control or slow that process for the bleeding. And so it's kind of like a dam that's already starting to burst a little bit, and you're trying to patch it up as best you can and try to just keep everything within the blood vessels and not leaking and so forth. So, and nutrition's a really big part of that. I'd love to talk about that for the audience too at some point. But Judy, do you have something you wanted to ask about that specifically?
Well, if you had a bleeding problem in your eye, would your eyes not look bloodshot so that you'd notice that something was wrong?
You would not notice that at all. It's internally, so you're not going to see it on the outside of the eye, where you might see like a blood vessel break on the white of the eye. It's not like that. It's internal. And so you won't see it, but you'll start to notice things in your vision, such as, maybe you're looking at some graph paper or even a doorway, and you might see a little bit of a wave in that, and there's not a wave in it. Some people notice it on driving and telephone poles. They might look at a telephone pole, and then it looks like there's a piece missing out of the telephone pole when they look at it. So those are all symptoms of macular degeneration, as well as just plain decreased vision, harder to read, harder to do things, can't make out faces like you mentioned a minute ago, Bill. Good peripheral vision, but the central vision is not as clear.
We have a central vision here at WLCN.
Let's hear it.
And it's concentrated upon our sponsors. And if we don't put the view on them, we're going to be in serious trouble.
Let's
go right
do that.
ahead, Jim. Back live in the studios here at WLCN. The program is Viewpoint. I have a very interesting guest this morning, Dr. Todd Nobbe, son of Ray Nobbe and his dear mother. 648-5510. There must be somebody out there that's like me that has eye problems, feel their way in and out of the bathroom. And so feel free to call Todd Nobbe, 648-5510. We were off air. We were discussing the seriousness of diet. And so let's address that program.
Yeah, with a lot of our conditions we have in the United States in general, a lot of things are related to inflammation, and inflammation has to do with what we what we take into our diet. And so bottom line is, the more vegetables we eat and things along those lines, your dark greens and your colored vegetables are just healthier for your body in general versus all the other stuff that we're not supposed to eat, that we know we're not supposed to eat, but they taste good to some degree.
Like trick-or-treats.
Yes, trick-or-treats is a great example this time of year. Thank you for saying that. And so a lot of the things that we treat, especially with, you mentioned earlier, there's not necessarily a treatment or a cure for macular degeneration, and of course as time goes on, we degenerate and so forth. But I've actually seen some reversals, in the retina. We have an instrument within our office that takes your paper-thin retina and expands it so that we can really see these deposits, or these waste deposits called drusen, that are from dry macular degeneration. And when that builds up, it starts to affect the vision adversely. So we can see those, if we catch those things early on, literally start to go away when we supplement with high levels of something called zeaxanthin, and then also lutein, which is a little more commonly heard about. Lutein is from your dark greens. Zeaxanthin is from your colored vegetables. But the trick again is we just don't get enough of it. Even if you're trying to pay attention to it in your diet, which we like people to do, it's very difficult for them to do that. So unless you got to throw a lot of vegetables in a blender and go for it, or take a supplement.
I'm sitting here thinking how, as in all medicine, of course, but the development of instrumentations and more sophisticated way to treat. When I was a kid, when first went after my measles bout and decided that I really wasn't seeing very well, went to Dr. Watson W. Galey, forerunner of the Galey Clinic.
Sure.
And in those days, they put a pair of frames on you with slots in them, and they'd reach in and put a lens in there. And does that look better?
I have a set of those in my office, yeah.
Is that right?
Sure.
Well, now they take a camera and look into your eye, and 30 seconds later, they've got a picture of what's back in there.
That's right.
Like everything else in medicine, the quantum leaps, all of which make us much better patients.
Way better. As doctors in diagnosing conditions, I am very thankful for the technology that we have, including photos, which have been around for ever since I've been out of school. Of course, the technology and the megapixels and how much detail we can zoom in has helped. But really, right now, using confocal scanning lasers, when we use those and look at the eye, it's like an MRI of your retina, literally, when we look at it. That's why I was mentioning about the little drusen or the bumps we can see. And that's thanks to that technology. And so it's wonderful because you can actually look and say, hey, I'm starting to do this treatment, or I'm gonna raise up the person's plant pigments they're taking in, with zeaxanthin and lutein to this level, or maybe we need it at a higher level for them. And you literally get to see what's happening on the retina and whether or not that's responding to that treatment. And we have another instrument, speaking of this technology, that literally you can come in and we measure how much plant pigment is in your macula. So if you're low, maybe we don't even see any signs of it in the eye yet, or maybe you're 40 years old and we don't expect to see any of those signs yet. But when we do that test, it tells us if that's low on you. If it's low on you, that increases your risk for macular degeneration. Same thing with having light-colored eyes, irises, as well as light skin. Females are more at risk. Smoking adversely affects those things. A lot of things. Ultraviolet light. So when we talk about wearing sunglasses and not smoking and eat right and all those types of things, it really makes you last longer and it keeps your eyesight longer. Yeah.
What about the common everyday type of afflictions that people suffer from? When I was a kid, if they said the word pink eye,
yeah,
I got it.
You ran for cover, didn't you?
She just walked by and she picked it up.
Yeah, and my dad would get a sty in his eye right along.
Yeah.
Now, why are some people so susceptible to some of these things?
Yeah, so, of course, with anything, it's, hereditary, genetics, things along those lines of certain conditions, as well as where you're at and so forth. But you mentioned a sty, for instance.
Yes.
I mentioned those glands in your eyelids earlier that provide oil to the eye. When those get clogged up, that becomes a sty. It starts to expand, and then you see a bump on the eyelid.
Yeah.
And so, in some cases, simple warm compresses to the eye and massaging those glands kind of helps get rid of that. In other cases, we have to do that as well as an antibiotic, to try to get in there and get any type of infection that may be present.
Are they as common as they used to be?
Oh, yeah, we still see them.
Is that
Absolutely,
right? Well, yeah, you just rarely hear anybody use that word.
Yeah.
Is it something that you should see your eye doctor about, or is it something that'll just go away when it's through with you?
Yeah, here's my encouragement on that. My encouragement on that is to make sure that, sometimes even the simplest things, including a broken blood vessel in the front of the eye, and they go, it's just a broken blood vessel, that'll go away. Or a bump, a bump can be, or a sty can be multiple things. And you really need to look at it. The doctor will, pull the eyelid down and look around it, make sure nothing else is, in the appearance of cancer or something along that. That's a far stretch, okay, and it's not very common from that regard as far as, somebody comes in with a sty and it's that quick. But those are the kind of things you have to rule out. And then once you rule out, you can get a better treatment, for those types of outcomes and so
They
forth.
teach communications in ophthalmology school. They must have, because you sure know how to communicate.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Very nicely.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm glad that we had this little brain bump to bring Todd on. It's just nice to know that right here in Lincoln, Illinois, you're going to get about as good a treatment you're going to get unless you need an ophthalmologist. And an optometrist like Dr. Nobbe knows when to send somebody to an ophthalmologist. Now, you want to describe the difference for those who might think I don't know what I'm talking about. Which would be about right.
You're doing great. Optometrists typically won't do, go in and do a cataract surgery or those types of things, or versus it's kind of interesting. There's a lot of overlap. I treat glaucoma, and look and follow macular degeneration, those types of things. When it comes to injections in Illinois, you have to have an ophthalmologist for that currently, because that's a state of Illinois laws for that. Now you go to another state, and if their laws are that way, an optometrist can do injections there.
I'll be darned.
So it really depends on what the state allows, and literally being able to do that. Now for me in Lincoln, I hear this all the time. People want to stay local. They want to make sure they get as much done here as possible, which is why I have that state-of-the-art equipment in our office, because we want to be able to evaluate and make a call real quickly to say, okay, is this something that we're going to need some surgical intervention on, or is this something we're just going to watch and it'll improve as time goes on, or some other form of treatment. So having that equipment here, I think, is very important. And then, of course, knowing at that point exactly what the condition is to get it to the right doctor, because even ophthalmology, they may have somebody that specializes in retina, like you mentioned earlier, or maybe just primarily cataract removal, or maybe some lid surgeries and things along those lines for oculoplastics. So it just really depends. And so I think the lines over the years have really blurred
Kind of blurred a little bit, or
yeah,
a lot.
A
lot, not even a little bit.
Yeah. So, and we all count on each other. I think we really do. I mean, as far as the eye care, taking care of people.
In the health care of your eyes, two words are heard more often, I think, than the rest, and that's cataracts and glaucoma.
Yeah.
And I think everybody is issued cataracts after a certain age, aren't they?
Yeah, I think you get a ticket at some point, no matter what, and when your time's up for that, you get it. That's correct.
Yeah.
Well, talk about the removal of those. May I just interject?
Yeah, please, and thank you.
So if Judy and I have cataracts, do we go in holding hands together? And
that would be, I would get that on video, so if you guys want to watch that.
So, seriously, the treatment of cataracts, let's address that.
Yeah, so basic treatment for those types of things, again, is if I will tell you again, nutrition comes back and plays a role with everything. So if you're living a healthier lifestyle, you're wearing sun protection against ultraviolet, it literally pushes those things off longer, for when you're going to get them. Every family will have them at kind of different times. Maybe your side of the family tends to get things a little sooner than your side of with your family. And so you have to take that into consideration, and then you take age into consideration. If you farmed a lot of your life and you're outside, or some type of job that requires you to be outside, that's a lot of ultraviolet light exposure. So again, that's going to have an impact on how quickly you get it. Treatment-wise, we look at it and we determine, and very, very often, I got to step back here and say this. Inside the eye, the lens, which is what does all your focusing all your life, and when you hit 40, usually right around there, you start losing that ability to focus. We start needing reading glasses and things like that. But that same lens that's clear, as time goes on, becomes a little bit yellowed or browned and more opaque. And as it's going through this change, very often, we'll change the glasses because it's the power inside the eye that's changing as this turns into a cataract eventually. And so very often we're changing glasses up until the point where, okay, now we can't change glasses anymore. It's time to think about getting some surgery done to get you to see better. So the surgeon will then go in and take out the lens, and then they'll put in a new clear lens to replace it. So once the clear lens is in place, light passes through very easily again, and voila, as long as the retina is good, you're going to start seeing better again.
It's just a miracle what you can do.
It's really neat, and it's such a quick procedure. I mean, my goodness, 5 minutes or less in actual surgery. It's the most done, to my knowledge, I've got to say it this way, to my knowledge, it's the most done procedure ever.
Very common, just as common as can be, And even on older people, which is amazing. Go right ahead, Mrs. Busby. You're going to propound something very, very serious.
You mentioned about sunglasses.
That's great. I love it. You got to have fun, and you guys have fun. I love it here. I love it.
She never knows what's coming from me.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This is most certainly true. You mentioned about the sun and having an outdoor job where you're exposed to a lot of ultraviolet light. Now, in the olden days, I remember my grandma talking about everybody wore big hats and things because they didn't want to have any sun exposure because they didn't want to be tan at all. Well, now we've got a generation of sun worshipers.
Sure.
Not only outdoors in the sun, but in the sun-tan places. Now, how is this for your eyesight?
Yeah, well, certainly, again, if you're in a suntan place or something like that, they usually will provide sun protection for you there. That's something you just want to do, keep your eyes closed and have that. But that's not even something I go recommend to people, from that regard. Again, protection, broad-brimmed hats, clothing when you're outside, really protecting the skin. Because as you know, as time goes on, you're going to end up with some level of skin cancer at some point that needs to be removed, right? So we do get those in and around the eyes. The eyelids themselves are very thin tissue, and so it's a little bit easier to get some, cancers in that area as well around the eye. So again, protecting the eye. One thing that's slightly more hidden these days than we've really had to deal with before. You mentioned electronics in the beginning of our discussion. Mm-hmm. And a lot of electronics are giving off a little bit of a blue light admittance. And blue light is it's a kind of a hot topic right now, and what it thinks that it's doing to the retina as far as damaging over time. So, like ultraviolet, we have that blue that's right there. Not all of blue, but a section of blue that we want to protect our eyes from. Now, here's the catch: it's outside all the time. Okay, that same type of light, but it's also coming off a lot of our monitors and our phones we look at and things like that, LED lights that we use. So we have more exposure to it. So we counteract that by having lenses like the ones I'm wearing that will block not only ultraviolet light but also block some of that harmful blue light. Again, protecting your eyes against things like macular degeneration down the road.
Doctor, I used to wear sunglasses a lot, and one day I discovered that I couldn't see the golf ball as well with sunglasses on as without them.
Yeah.
What's the correlation to that?
Well, that is a huge. I'm going to do my best to answer that. There is a lot of different tints. What's
man.
That? Yeah. There's first of all, again, you want a healthy eye. Everything starts with healthy eye, and then when you talk about sunglasses and so forth, there are specific golf lenses are usually a type of a green color that help you read the greens and colorations and contrasts a little bit better. There's also polarized lenses, which cut glare. When like you're looking at a car and getting a reflection and so forth. I believe I think it's 1/3. I think that's correct. Of car accidents are related to some form or another of glare. So if you can reduce that, you are potentially avoiding some accidents, which is really a helpful type of thing. Interesting enough, though, I told you before about the zeaxanthin and the lutein. That is such a hot topic, but having those increased in your body, for instance, in sports, really helps your processing speed, so how quickly you respond to something and think about it, and what you're looking at, the contrast of the things you're looking at, as well as a little protection against lights. So, for instance, I mentioned it earlier, we use the I Promise products in our office. Those type of products are literally being used, that specific company actually, by all Major League Baseball players, because of how it helps them to, once that ball is released at the pitch, your brain starts right there, and it's like, how is that ball being released? How is it spinning? What's the rotation? And in this half second of time, you have to process what it's doing. You have to prepare yourself for it and adjust your swing. And so there's a lot of things in sports that just that visual edge, if you will, really makes players better. So we do that. For the rest of us, it's better response on our driving time. We may come across some lights that are coming across us at night, and then it's like, oh my gosh, those lights were bright, and then your eyes have to recover, to see again. So when those things are high levels in your body, those nutrition, it really helps your eyes recover quickly, and see the road again, so that you can drive, safely. So those are some things.
You talk about headlights. These halogen headlights are a beast.
They're great if you're behind the wheel, but if you're on the receiving end,
if you're behind your own wheel, they're nasty.
That's right.
Are they hard on your eyes too? Because man, it about strikes you blind.
Well, there's a lot of very intense LED lights, that are made, and how I think headlights are aimed is very important.
Yes.
Some car companies literally I'm trying to think how to describe this. If you're driving on a 2-lane road, literally will have the lights out in front of you, but then it tapers off a little bit to the left so that oncoming driver doesn't get, like a hit with that light. So there's some manufacturers that do that type of thing. So I think as technology improves and the brightness of the lights, and of course they don't take up much energy, as that stuff starts to improve more and more and more, I think you're going to see better outcomes on how those lights are adjusted, for the receiver of them as well as the driver of the car. Yeah.
Another thing about light bulbs, now instead of just buying light bulbs, they advertise that you should buy these others instead because they last so much longer, etc. Are they a factor in your eyesight at all?
I think what mainly you're talking about there is going to be your LED lights.
Yes.
Again. Yeah. And again, I think it matters on the type of wavelengths and so forth that you're getting from those. There's cooler ones and then there's warmer ones. And cooler lights, I think, are more harsh, from that regard. They're typically very, very brilliant, almost a blue type of a light. But I think our softer ones, most of us will go, oh yeah, it's more comfortable. We relax when we get around those kind of lights. So if you look on the back of the label on those, some of them will say that they're a little warmer. And again, I'm not an expert on this. I'm just giving you my opinion. But the warmer light, I think, makes us all feel a little bit more comfortable for doing it and replacing our lights with those.
Dr. Todd Nobbe has been with us this morning. We're about to run. My eyes are good enough that I can see the clock, and it keeps on ticking, and that second hand keeps swinging away. Would you like to sum up with anything, Dr. Nobbe? We appreciate you being with us, sir.
Well, thank you. I got to tell you, I really appreciate you having me out here and being able to talk about it. I love talking about eyes. I get to do that with my patients, of course, and glad to be back in Lincoln. It's been 23 years since I've been here, and that's hard to say out loud. But time keeps going by.
What did I tell you about time?
Yeah. Well, I heard it from my parents long ago. They said, enjoy it. Time will fly by quickly, and it certainly does. So.
Well, we always try to close Viewpoint with a subject, with a comment about the subject matter of the day. And I might say in passing that this could apply to our politicians. I would like for them to take a listen to this. Keep your eye on the stars and your feet on the ground. Thank you, Dr. Todd Nobbe.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.